sing it, and you can sing along or not. We'll do a quick meditation, and then we're going to go into review. Okay. Did I miss anything?
Sashi Kuki Jushin Metok Tram Rira Vinshin Mei Empati Sange Shindu Nite Uargi Roku Nandak Shinga Juparsho Idam Guru Ratnamanda Kamir Sayami Sange Shulam Soki Chodnamba Jamshu Bardu Dakni Kyasushi Daki Chenyen Gipe Sunamki Drola Penshir Sange Druparsho Sange Shulam Soki Chodnamba Jamshu Bardu Dakni Kyatsuchi Daki Chenyen Gize Sonamki Rola Penshir Sange Druparsho Sange Shulam Soki Chodnamba Jamshu Bardu Dakni Kyatsuchi Daki Chenyen Gipe Sonamki Rola Penshir Sange Druparsho.
I'm going to have everybody turn around and lie down while we do a short meditation. Make sure your hands are palm up. Yeah, make sure you're not touching anybody or thing if you don't need. Okay. When you hear this chime, let it create an automatic response to relaxation. Begin to breathe gently, naturally, through your nose. Begin to release, let go, and loosen up. Keep your mind bright and aware while completely relaxing your body. And let your awareness now begin to descend into the body, into your torso, down your thighs, down to the balls of your feet. And then vertically begin to descend your awareness to the ground. Start observing the firmness of the ground, the temperature, ground your awareness in witnessing mode so that there's no imagination or rumination happening. Simply being present, mindfully aware of the sensations of your body. Use each breath to loosen any knots, areas of tension. Really begin to scan your body, familiarizing yourself with it. How does it feel? Feel how the breath changes and moves, even the hairs on your body. We rarely have time during the day to check in, and our body unfortunately harbors all, if not most, of the stresses that we burden ourselves with throughout the day. So for the rest of this meditation, all you're asked to do is simply relax. Keeping your mind alert, but see if you can really relax, and then go deeper. If you're hijacked by a thought, simply relax, release, using your breath. And come back to the object, which is simply observing how your breath affects your body. When you're ready, stretch your arms, open your eyes. Okay. All right, so this is how we're going to do this. I have quizzes for class 10 up here for those of you that are interested in finishing the quizzes. Let me know, and then we'll make sure that whatever group that you're in, there's a quiz on in your group. I don't think we need to go over it because we'll be going over the quiz questions anyway in the final. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so I have 7 finals with me, and I was thinking there's at least groups of 2 or 3 with each final. Yeah, does that work? Okay. So I'm just gonna go around and hand off. And the way we're gonna do this is you're gonna be in your groups of either 2 or 3, and you're going to work on the quiz, and then we're gonna go over it together all as a group. Does that make sense? That'll work? Okay. We'll make sure someone's on it.
These are each different.
Armando too.
You can all just join me here.
It's a lot of questions.
We've groups of 4 here, is that okay?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, we guys can go into
You guys. So Sam, Scott, Armando, I'm Sandy. But he'll be Armando, so we have all S's. Okay, perfect. We get quiz time.
Start Mondo or start
Start Mondo is good. I like Start
Do you need some blocks?
Yes.
Send some blocks to that one.
Good.
Yep.
Okay. So you guys will listen to us in 2 seconds. Alright, alright, so, yeah. Yeah, I think this would probably be good for you, which is final exam, so like review everything like we learned so far. So number 1 is give the Sanskrit and Tibetan names for the Buddhist study of logic and perception, which is the same word as which is the same as the word for correct or valid perception. So that's Tema.
Right, you just written them, right?
Yeah. So Tema and Pramana. And Pramana. I think Pramana is the Tibetan and Tema is the Sanskrit. Yeah. Double check.
I guess the first one.
I think Tema is the
That's about perception. That which is perceived as unaffected perception.
Yeah. So these are the words that we're using a lot. Primarily Tema, which is TSE-NA. Number 2, what is the Buddhist definition of existence? We go over this one.
Buddhist definition of existence?
Yeah, what is the Buddhist definition of existence? I overheard Sarah's answer. Sorry, anything that can be perceived as a valid perception. Yeah. So a valid perception or correct perception is something that's perceived with an unaffected mind. So unaffected is sort of like defined as like not behaving substances. It even goes into like individuals who might have a mental illness, like who has an affected mind. That would kind of fall under that. And we go even further, which I think that the questions and answers will go further. We go further and define a valid perception as something that's fresh, meaning something that isn't tainted by an assumption or when you're just so out of your mind, you just have a complete wrong view of it. There's like, I think there's like 5 different like things that aren't valid perceptions, which I think we'll probably go through. And it's great to think of it as like when you perceive someone or an object, that come with it, that like that present image awareness of like what this is, rather than seeing it as like my whole history growing up knowing this object as that, and that's like,
That's it.
yeah, and that's it. Like you don't really give that, you know, give it the space or room to like be what it is in the present. Number 3, what did the Buddha himself say is the purpose of Buddhist logic?
We don't know. Oh, sure.
Sounds pretty good. There's a quotation, so I think you're correct. Which is the about wait.
I or someone like myself can judge a person.
Or someone. Okay. And so.
Yeah, instead of formal logic and reasoning. So, like myself can judge a person, but no normal person should judge another.
No normal person should judge another.
Yeah, for he or she will fall.
We talked about that. If there was any question or why is that we
Judge another. Okay.
For
For
he,
he or she. For he or she is the exact quotation.
Still, you're not supposed to go.
Can you look at my notes properly? Do you have the Tibetan of it?
I'm not sure.
formal logic and reasoning appears as following.
Probably someone would be said, well,
I guess we don't have to, okay, we have to do the quote. Number 4 is name the 2 basic types of valid perception and what levels of reality they're used to perceive.
Okay.
So if you
reality.
You here, right?
Mhm.
3 levels of reality. I believe. And G,
which is obvious evidence of reality.
those things which you can perceive without any problem.
And then
Hidden, that which is hidden.
these are 3 levels of reality.
Right, the other 3 levels, but then there's 2 types of perception.
Oh.
Direct perception.
Oh, no sum sema.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's the 2 types of direct perception.
Types of perception, yeah. Okay. No sum sema.
And the other one is just
Jetpack.
that's the reasoning.
I know those 2 things you're talking about, I'm just not sure. It's here, on the 2 types of same or 2 types of valid perception. Direct perception.
No, dependent on reasoning.
Right, that's the person. One is the Dutch.
And okay, so no sum sema is used to perceive obvious / evident reality. And then jikha sema, which is deductive reasoning, that's to perceive kokir, which is hidden, and then shintu kokir, which is deeply hidden.
That's when she described the example of the pen floating behind her, right? Like you can hear it, you can see it, but you deduce that in the sound.
Not even two you're talking about reality. Oh, and even two types of perceptions.
On the third level, you don't
Direct.
see.
Is like karma. Like you can see the part why giving. All right. Kind of like deductive or like the second level of your reality is like the streets outside.
Okay.
Like right there, you don't see them.
You know it's there.
You can
They watch it.
Yeah.
I can.
So yeah, so just to explain, so the first, so the two basic types of valid perception, one is, which is not reasoning. It's something that you can perceive through your senses, taste, touch, hear, yeah, sight, all that.
I mean, that's what I would.
And what type of reality that you perceive is what we call the obvious evident reality, not things that you see, you can touch.
Yeah.
That's separate. The second type of valid perception is called JWAP and SEMA, and that's you're deducing something understand that it exists or that.
That something has happened or.
Yeah. Yeah. So and then the two subsets of that is hidden reality and deeply hidden reality. So hidden reality is things you don't see but you can do. They're like what you you hear the sound, you get to see it, but you know that there's a hand calling something. Deeply hidden reality is what we call the subtle workings of karma. And karma is defined as the movement of the mind. Most people think of karma as like, oh, like a boomerang effect, like we do something bad, something bad, something bad. But karma, in the way that I guess the tradition that would explain it is like karma, we use like imagery of like seeds, like you plant a seed, or it could have been within this lifetime, it could have been within past lifetimes, like by your actions, by your intentions. Like you plant the seed, like you, and in a way it does come back, and it does come back like tenfold, and that's why they use like the imagery of like a seed that grows into a tree.
And it could be negative or positive.
Karma, yeah. So that's like the deeply hidden. So it's kind of like, if I perceive Armando yelling at me and telling me I'm stupid, it's most likely because I had called someone stupid and made them feel stupid in the past, whether it was this lifetime or previously. And it can like, some things happen to me when like I definitely didn't deserve this. I definitely didn't do this in this lifetime, but it's like, okay, maybe it was like the last past or something like hidden. So that's like the deeply hidden reality that is under the second category of valid perception. All right, question number 5. Give the text of Master Digna's famous opening statement.
Is that the I bow down to the person?
Yeah.
I bow down to the person who has these 5 qualities.
So to receive that reaction on the senses and then deduction. If that's what you mean perception.
The protector.
Senses and then
Goes down to the earth.
the last of the 4 reasonings of the forward order involves great
The
compassion.
features.
What is the difference between great compassion, holy great compassion, and justice?
Those who wish to benefit. Sentient beings.
That's the last. Yes.
And those who have turned into persons with valid perception.
Sorry, do you want to read it all together for them?
I bow down to the person who has these 5 qualities. protector goes down to this, the teacher, those who wish to benefit from their means, and those who turn into persons without perception.
I is the author of this text, Master Jee Chang.
Oh, wasn't the Buddha?
Yeah, I
Did
think
you write that down?
about a person who's, yeah, the question about this opening statement.
He was the author of what?
Do I have that? I think I have it in my first notes.
Maybe the 3 reasons why the charm defense believe the mind died.
He wrote the Compendium on Valid Perception by Master Jee Chang, who lived about 440.
Yeah, so.
Alright, question number 6, give the definition of valid perception. Huh? Well, it gave what are the terms? So definition of valid perception is that which is perceived with an unaffected mind.
With correct view or something.
So these are the 33 reasons I take it.
Number 7 is describe very generally the meaning of the term person in valid perception. No, I think so because you could have valid perception, but not. I think forget what qualifies you as Buddha, but I think it's having the direct perception of emptiness and a bunch of other things, having bodhicitta, that sort of stuff. But I think a person of valid perception is one who perceives with an unaffected mind. I guess that's a very simple way to describe it. I think it's probably I think it's kind of bouncing back and forth a little bit. I don't know if I have class 1 or 1. I'm like my meditation.
Yeah.
What was it again?
And then the last one's about the land protection.
Mind of the person of valid perception. Yeah. I mean, I think just someone who perceives with an unaffected mind.
So those were there. Cool. So, oh, cool. Let's talk about this. One meaning of the material cause is it's flopping over. Yeah, the thing that causes it to flop over, like the age of the truck, not the soil or the water.
Like one who has sema, right?
That's also the thing that we could tell you about that part of it.
Seeing the totality of all objects. Valid perception all the time, which that's very simple. It's like the question is answered, the answer.
Oh, yeah.
Alright, number 8, what are the 3 main methods for a normal person to determine that the Buddha is totally correct about the very deep teachings he gave?
Logical reasoning,
Yeah. But without
that's part of the deduction.
I know this is painful. I promise you it will be so much clearer. It's like, what?
Oh, thanks. The 3 tests or 3 methods? Yeah. So,
Oh, gee, what?
yeah, the 3 tests. So first is Nielsen Statement can't be disproved by any direct perception you have or have had.
Yeah, here we're talking about living Google Maps. So
When I was a
that's-
kid, I was like, no one can see.
Can't show this to anyone.
Yeah. My handwriting is so neat like that that I just.
Really?
Well, number 2 is Jee Chang. The statement can't be contradicted by correct airtime statement.
No. Yeah. Like it's, I understand, like, one next to yeah. But.
Number 3 is.
Nothing he ever said before contradicts what he said.
And it's not. Yeah.
That's usually called on the show.
What if I asked you who are these?
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
You okay?
They're saying here, I'm just repeating it to myself. So 3 main methods for a normal person to determine that the Buddha is totally correct about very deep teachings he gave. And I think like within traditional Buddhism, which is like something that I kind of like upbringing is like, it is about questioning, it is about like testing it and seeing if it makes sense, if you believe that this is like a true statement. So method number 1, the statement can't be disproved by any direct perception you have or have had. So it could be like, okay, there's a statement, thinking about it, like, if I were to have a fresh perception of it and try to test it, I can't disprove it. Have I done that yet? I don't know, debatable. Number 2, the statement can't be contradicted by correct airtight reasoning. So in this class, it's logic heavy because like we go through the text and we all discuss like the logic of it. And so if it's airtight, if there's like, no areas that can be disproved, then you guys don't believe the statement. And the third one is nothing he ever said before contradicts what he said later. So like, I guess reading through all the texts, it's like, it doesn't contradict this. However, I've heard that there are some like.
Why can't this on outside
Right.
Testing you and how you perceive it. It's like, I'm not perceive it differently than how I perceive it because of my environment, my belief in
Right.
reality.
And how it's occurring to you versus
Yeah.
me.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe G would go through the pen today, because it's like an important, like, foundational lesson.
Yeah.
G,
are you gonna do the pen thing tonight?
Alright.
It won't happen.
Alright, number 9. Name and describe the 3 ground rules for interpreting data, that is, for deciding its substantive sources aside from
Feels like it has
only
to happen
figures
every class,
and
not
not
every class. I feel like it has to happen every time.
Are you ever that?
No, it's like, I mean, I guess I say it because it's.
Or
I've heard
Yes.
so many
That's the mind
groups,
run.
I get every, like, it's just like that really.
Right, yeah.
Kill your mom and
Your father.
I don't know, it's weird.
So kill your mother and father is a literal statement, it's a figurative statement.
I guess it grew, I
and
guess
there's 3 rules of determining when to take this statement as stated, right?
Concept of, okay, I mean, you have people say that, you sit there and like, I know, I get it, and then. It was always
What
clear to me
was-
how much
what
I
was
should
the
get it
true
when I
intent?
would leave the object and write with the pen and like look over and see someone and then make some judgment or say something, you know, or think something, or you know, or feel it. I'm like, oh. You know? That's my idea.
Okay, here was that,
Does it contradict obvious or reality?
multiple elements of concept. This is proof number 10. I think that's the statement.
Okay, I'm gonna give you guys 10 more minutes to get as far as you can, and then we'll start to do and see where we all end up. Give you 10 more minutes.
To make the statement. To achieve a certain purpose.
Yeah, right. And then, yeah.
Is there more to that?
Yeah, so when we say kill your mother and father, it's not a literal statement. And about grasping. Like, to kill your mother and actually like your first mother or father would be like a bad karma to gather for yourself. But it's what it's really saying is like it's challenging your attachment to I guess your parents. Yeah, so I guess like the true intent statement is to call out like what are you attached to. I guess number 2 does it contradict obvious direct reality or perception? I mean, yes, I could contradict it. Is there compelling logic statements to choose? I guess the purpose is to bring attention to like what your attachment is.
Right. It's perhaps something to say yes.
Number 10, what does a person have to know in order to be all knowing? Oh, knowing what to take up and what to give up, right? Is that what yeah, things you should take up and what you should let
Oh, yeah. Georgia? The tough part, the
But you might not know what's right.
I think we'll maybe get to that.
What you do to help, it's a help.
Because I think in the following classes, we start going through like what are the material causes and like what's changing.
That's the thing. How we're using
sometimes like to think of this as like choosing your battles, you know? Like someone who's gonna shift mind is not gonna spend like their energy on something that's like an energy based. They know that's not gonna be good for them. It's how you know what to give up and what to pick up.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's why, yeah. And back to the ego. Well, it doesn't say anything about like, just saying another state of mind of a similar type, it's not saying that the last is about rebirth, right? It's just saying our mind causes that.
Number 11, what energy we have that the Buddha is unerring?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, what you understand why it's.
Towards the end of class.
Because the next state of mind is class. Well, I think that's what water sign
I think this goes into the 4 reasons.
Yeah, right, the machine,
Is there 3 parts for master?
12 goes into
Oh, okay.
plus
I see what you mean. The 5 powers.
Yeah, so you were talking about Brooklyn and difficult.
Yeah, I remember this was on the quiz.
Evidence that the Buddha is unerring because he has had direct perception of us.
Yeah, I didn't feel like 3 buckets. Yeah, like these are the things we're using. So then I really don't know.
It relates to like 4 other issues, like,
You know.
I mean, I see,
Name and describe the 3 types of the 8 link of the G. I know. The 3 types of the 8. Yeah, 3 types.
I don't know, totally separately rather than.
And it's also about giving,
Yes.
like, having direct
But yeah, I have not wanted to read
I feel like we put so many answers, we have to get it right now.
And then
12, the last of the 4 reasonings of the forward order involves great compassion.
Yep.
What's the difference between great compassion and holy great
So
compassion?
not wanting to.
So,
So,
yeah, you can dog.
compassion is the wish that
Typically,
others
you see things in a certain way that
be free from common suffering,
Yeah, it's the craving for meat. Yeah.
without taking upon oneself
We talked about the point
the
of that last one.
responsibility
Yeah, right.
to bring this about.
Yeah.
Compassion is the wish that others be free from common suffering without taking upon oneself the responsibility
We know that one.
Two is
great compassion.
But we have,
Great compassion is the wish that all others be free from all suffering
what does the mission of the all-knowing? We talked about it as, what to give up.
And the decision to make this happen oneself. Oneself.
The key to why craving triggers your existing karma at the moment of death is how it forces to find yourself. Describe the 4 levels of how to find yourself.
The decision to protect all beings.
Oh, we might be the very last, so, yeah. Yeah, which one?
That is the compassion.
Yeah.
Holy great compassion.
Yeah.
So, holy great compassion is the compassion and enlightened being of someone who actually does help all of the beings.
Okay. Yeah. See where everyone landed.
That would trigger it for sure. Where's my?
Ready?
Yeah, we've got so many pages left.
How many?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Oh, it's okay. You'll get through it.
It's
See how far we get.
Yeah.
It's like 3
It's
seconds.
like a
Okay, here we go. So this course, we've been talking about the proof of future lives. Everything that is in this review was a build to how that makes sense and if that makes sense and why that would make sense. So let's start with the first question. The first question was, give the Sanskrit and Tibetan name for the Buddhist study of logic and perception, which is the same as the word for correct or valid perception. If you guys don't know this, I'm gonna be really sad. I'm really sad.
Sena and Prana.
Yes, thank you. I feel like I should read trees.
What?
You know what I mean? No, that would be so much cooler. Okay, so we have sema and valid perception. I know that there's a question later on that asks what the definition of it is, but since this is the first question without knowing that, I think we should talk about it now. What is the definition? What's a valid perception?
It's something that you perceive with fresh, unaffected state of mind. Unaffected meaning you're not under the influence of any sort of substances or mental afflictions like anger or guilt.
Right. So a valid perception is it's simply just a correct perception that you would have, that one would have in an unaffected state of mind. That's it, right? That's all it is. There's nothing really fancy about it. But it's important that we start using this as a foundation as we go, right? Second question was, what is the Buddhist definition of existence?
Anything that can be perceived with a valid perception.
So existence means anything that can be perceived with a valid perception. That's all that is. That works for everyone? Okay. So we have existence here, and then we also have valid perception as kind of 2 topics that and just in case if you for the track for what is the Buddhist definition of existence, if you need that, or want that. The next question is, what did the Buddha himself say is the purpose of Buddhist logic? I'm going to remember the quote.
That was that thing that was like, only I or another person like me can judge other people, and if you are judging them, then you're gonna fall or fail.
Right, so this was it. I or someone like myself can judge a person, but no normal person should judge another, for he or she will fall, or fail. You would actually fail, but
So
anyway.
what are judging?
Okay, so that's a good question. So what does the statement mean? That the Buddha can be judgy and you can't? And I'm like, yes, more reason why I want to be the Buddha. Yeah. Oh God, that'd be really scary. What does the statement mean? Why is the Buddha saying in this quote that someone like him can judge another, but no one else cannot?
Is he talking about having a direct perception of emptiness, like the Buddha being one who's awakened, who's had a direct perception of emptiness, who understands where ultimate reality comes from, is able to, I mean, I almost feel like judge is like a figurative term, not
It's a
almost not
figurative term.
literal.
Yeah, sure. But we make assumptions and judgments all the time, right? Yeah. So it's actually tied more directly to that. It's actually more that the Buddha is saying, yes, I mean, obviously, we're making the assumption here that the Buddha is completely all-knowing, right? Completely omniscient. But in particular, what he's mentioning here and speaking to is about this idea of valid perception. That most of us don't have valid perceptions all the time. Does that sound okay to everyone? Is that fair? So is there someone here that's like, that's not true, lady. I have valid perceptions all the time. You know, because and in fact, if you start watching your mind even more subtly, even when you think that perhaps your mind is straight or right or correct or unafflicted, you could also start to look at different subtleties of afflictions. Like, are there subtleties of judgment that come in that have anything with anger or jealousy or fear, right? Do you ever, or even joy for that matter, let's bring joy into the table too. Like, sometimes people are so, like, I think about, yes, go ahead. Oh, fine. I think about like when I go to yoga, or when you go to a yoga class, how people walk out and they talk about like the yoga high. Have you ever had that where you're just like, and I've literally seen yogis be like so happy and so elated that they walk outside and like will walk right in front of a car and just like jolt, because it's like it is a sense, it's not an affliction per se, but it is a sense of being affected, your mind's being affected. So most of us walk around with not really having valid perceptions all the time. And in fact, we talked during that class in particular to how the Buddha has spoken and said that a valid perception is something that he has, that he's making that assumption actually here in a way, is saying that the Buddha actually has valid perceptions all the time, and that they only speak because there's a valid perception that they have. And so if you recall, we had a conversation in class about how many times do we speak with valid perceptions, and how many times do we speak using deductions or assumptions or, and I think the example I had was even, like Armando and I were hanging out talking about his brother. I think that was the example I had back then, where we're like, I wonder what he's going to do. Is he going to break up or not break up with his girlfriend? They broke up, by the way. But anyway, just so you know, we've been wondering.
But he was right, though.
Right, that's the word. But it was interesting because even in that conversation, we spent, I don't know, probably at least 30 minutes talking about like, I don't know, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. They're not even valid perceptions at all. The whole thing is based on a premise of like our own assumptions that we make about them and him and his girlfriend and what happens in their home and who's messed up and who's messed up even further, right? And so how many times do we live and work and cohabitate with our partners or our roommates, or some of us are parents? How many times do we move around the world and really have valid perceptions that we speak truthfully of? How much of that is kind of tainted to some degree, right? And so the statement here, basically the Buddha is saying, being one that is omniscient and who has valid perceptions, I can make not judgments per se, but I can judge one, because not just about how you one who's omniscient can see past, present, and future all at one time for all beings at one time, right? So that's what he's saying. He's like basically saying, if you can't read other people's minds, it's none of your business to be judging them. That's really what it is, right? If you don't know and you don't understand what it's like to be in their mind, you can't read it, you can't sense it, you have no business making judgments at all. Does that work for everyone? Okay. That sometimes does not work for me, but.
But how does that prove, or how does that give us the purpose for studying logic?
In general?
Yeah, isn't that what we're using this to answer that question? Like, what's the link between I'm on board with that, but then how does logic come in?
Well, the logic comes into the study of logic and perception is key in order to be able to understand emptiness anyway, right?
So it's just like to get to that.
Yeah, exactly.
Logic.
Yeah. And if you want to see emptiness and have that perception and move up in terms of your realizations, okay, you need to have a sense of logic so that you're also looking and deciphering what is true and what is not and how that works. While we talk about emptiness, since I brought up that word, we will do the pen. Just so we have this in context. So what's this?
Emoji pen.
Emoji pen. And if a dog came into the room, what would a dog think this might be?
Chew toy.
A chew toy, right? That they would chew on. So then the question is it a pen or is it a chew toy?
Both.
It's both. Why is it both?
Because both are valid perceptions.
They're both valid
perceptions. The
perceptions.
pen, the
Yeah.
dog validly sees it
Right.
as the chew toy.
And so if this can be, and that works for everyone, right? It can be both a pen and a chew toy based on the perception of whoever's looking at it. True? Fair? Okay. So then it goes to, then if that's true, what does that say about the pen? It's empty. And what does that mean?
It's not self-existent.
It's not self-existent. Meaning if this were self-existently a pen, then it would emanate to you and project onto you, I am a pen. And all beings, whatever shape or form they come in, would see this as a pen. Does that make sense? Okay. So then the other exercise I always kind of move to is then, so we're like, okay, well, how does that apply to everyone else? So then it's like, how many G's are in the room then?
As many, yeah.
Yeah.
As many as there are.
Yeah. Because each one of your perceptions are different from each other. They're not the same. Right? They're just not. And so what that means is that even I myself have there's an emptiness in me as well. That it's not like the world comes at me. You know, the world doesn't say you are this or you are that. It's also my projection. So I'm going to flip it the other way. So if you're seeing me a certain way, if each one of you are individual projections that you have, what you're realizing is the world comes from you. Does that make sense? It comes from you like this, rather than coming at you. So you're deciding throughout your day and your life, based on your karma, which we will kind of touch on a little bit today, of how you project onto things, how you understand things, how you decide what you like and what you don't like is based on your projections. Your life situation and circumstances are also projections that you put onto the world. So you're no longer a victim of the world in this paradigm. In fact, you're the one who's controlling your own world and your own destiny by the way in which you project onto the world. Yeah? Okay. So we have that under our belt. Okay. Next question. Name the two basic types of valid perception and what levels of reality they are used to perceive. So in the valid perception world, we had two different types of valid perceptions that we have. What were the two? Remember?
Nusum, to perceive evident reality using our senses.
Great.
B, give back sema, deductive valid perception, correct deductive reasoning.
Great. Nice. So the first one was direct valid perception, nungsum sema, that's up here. And so direct valid perception, what is that? Give me an example of what a direct valid perception would be. Right, my scarf is blue. This is a pen, right? Just a direct valid perception. And what would a deductive valid perception be?
I heard you put the pen down, but I didn't see you. Just
That's
now
right.
'cause your laptop is up. But
Yeah.
I know you put the pen down.
Right. So you see, so the direct valid perception is that you actually see this pen, right? Everyone, and then you are having an indirect or a deductive valid perception, or sorry, a deductive valid perception or deductive reasoning, that you hear this go down and you don't see it though. There's no valid perception, but you've deduced that I probably put it down. Yeah. Okay. So they're just two different types of valid perceptions to have. And I think this is interesting because I know it's really kind of granular, but it's fascinating to think about it and to start watching how many times during your day you make deductions and you actually believe that those deductions are true, and then you act on it. And then and you act on it, and not only are you doing that, but everyone around you is doing that too. You know what I mean? It's crazy. And so a lot of the times when you look at, like organizational behavior, companies that are trying to find a way to grow properly, their biggest problem that they always have, that they have to pay so much money to have people come in and teach them, which I don't even know if they're even looking at it that way. But they talk about, and you always hear like communication, but it's actually a valid perception situation where yes, you can communicate, but it's also how much are we making assumptions moment to moment rather than really having that direct valid perception, instead of thinking like, I think she's talking shit about me, and then getting all stressed out and then doing all this other stuff to, to protect yourself, rather than doing that, just going directly to her and being like, hey, is there something going on? I have this feeling, right? How many times do we just kind of skirt around or make these assumptions? Like, I think my boss is really upset at me, or, what was that like snarky little goodbye or whatever, right? I mean, there's so many different examples that we all have. So yeah, anyway, I think it's interesting to start looking at. Yes.
Valid still? Sorry.
Oh, the
Yeah,
perceptions.
that's my question.
Yeah.
Because I remember we talked about assumptions not being valid perceptions,
Yeah.
but deductions are.
Yeah, they're a type of valid perception. So you can still deduce. If you're using logic, you can deduce it. So it's like, you see it, my hand's going down. I mean, there's enough logic where you can see it, sure. But it's also good to just watch and see. Like, I think one of the examples we had in this class was if you were to step right outside and you saw two cars that had crashed into each other, and based on where they're at, you could easily make assumptions and maybe a deduction. Like the deduction is they hit each other. Like I didn't validly see them hit each other, but the two cars are now, damaged, and you can see that. But then you can start, but from there on, how do you then start to make assumptions, right? Where you're like, oh, well, that guy, I don't know why I said he's a guy. That person was over the line this way, and you'll start to make assumptions. Like I was crossing over the Williamsburg Bridge, and there were these two massive, there was one school bus and one truck that were trying to go through. And I don't know what happened, but they got stuck in the actual, on the bridge.
The right side lane, yeah.
Yeah. And
because it's like two lanes.
Yeah, they're like,
on like, there's 4 lanes, right? But there's like a division in the middle of the bridge.
right. And 2 of them got stuck on the side of the Williamsburg Bridge. and Armando and I were driving by it, and I said to him, like, look at those jackasses over there. Like, I wonder how that happened, you know? And even in that moment, I was thinking, the assumptions I made. Like, I had this whole storyline that went through where I was like, two guys, you know, just being like, I'm going to go first, and no one decided to give, and they got stuck, was the storyline that I had. I don't even know that's true, but that's what I assumed, right? And so we do this all the time. And so it's worth watching your mind to see when you do that, how you do that, especially when you're going out, even around the city. Like, when do you make these assumptions? And when is it different than a deduction? And how is that influencing your decisions of how you do things and why you do things and how you move through the world, you know? And where are there moments where perhaps considering a valid perception and interacting might actually be useful, you know? Like, Facebook is like the worst, like social media is the worst thing when it comes to valid perceptions, right? It's like, oh my God, like I have people say to me, like they'll pull up their phone, like, look what they're doing. And I'm like, I don't know, it's a photo. That's like a really nice, like summary, you know, like they're at the beach. And I'm like, do you know that they're at the beach? Like, they're definitely at the beach. And I find out she's sick at home. She's not at the beach. She's just thinking about the beach. And so she's posting pictures that are, you know, so it's interesting, like what social does to us with social media, of how we make these assumptions all the time that they're valid because we see it on our phone. Okay. Next question. Give the text of Master Dignaga's famous opening statement.
There was like somewhat of a part 2 to the last question. I don't know if you want to go over, but
Oh, was it?
And what levels of reality they're used to perceive.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes. Okay. So for direct valid perception, what level of reality would it be? Conventional, or like the most evident kind of deductive valid perception. When and how, what realities can that be in? Or is that in?
There's hidden realities, so things that you can deduce, and there's deeply hidden reality, the workings, subtle workings of karma.
That's right. Okay, so there's 3 different realities, right, that you just brought up. What's the first one? Conventional. The conventional reality. Everything that you see around you in using your 5 senses, that's conventional reality. The second one is hidden reality, which means what?
Things you're not perceiving with your senses at this very moment.
Yeah, like an example. What's an example of a hidden reality?
Like Bowery Street and Third. Like, I don't physically see them with my eyeballs right now, but I can deduce that they're there.
Yes, but I don't think that's a hidden reality.
I feel like, you know, I'm sure Ming has a house with a closet full of clothes because I see him with different clothes.
That could be one. I mean, usually, okay, so usually, So usually, like when we're talking about hidden realities, the example that they've given in the scripture would be something along the lines of emptiness, right? So like this concept of emptiness we just talked about, right? So knowing that this is empty of its own self nature, it's not self-existent. That concept of emptiness is not a valid perception that you have at this moment. You don't validly perceive emptiness. You've deduced emptiness from this concept that we're bringing up, and that's a hidden reality. Emptiness itself. It's the hidden realities are like the things you can't explain. You know, it's like, wait, how did I run it? Like this is a good one. I was just thinking about so-and-so, and I just ran into them on the street, and it's been like 20 years since I even thought about this person. That's crazy. Like, that's a hidden reality. It's like, what happened there? Karma is a really big one of hidden reality as well. Well, that's also deeply hidden. Yeah, it's deeply hidden. I just corrected myself, but yes. But there are these things where it's like, what is that? Like, you can't explain it, but you can deduce from it. So that would be hidden reality. Deeply hidden reality is, it's the subtle workings of karma. Mm-hmm. So when you run into someone, it's like, because you can make a deduction. Let's say you ran into someone and you spoke to them like, oh, well, I was going to this airport, you were going to this airport, that makes sense. And you can come up with a deduction. The deeply hidden reality is what's the karma in order for us to have met at that same time. You know, there's a karmic implication of that. Because in Buddhist philosophy, there is no luck. Luck is not part of our equation that we study. It's everything has a reasoning as to why things happen. There is no I don't know, even though it feels like I don't know, but there is really no I don't know. It's all based on what are the concepts of karma to be able to have the life that you have and to continue to, and to create the life that you want to have.
So
Right.
if someone is suddenly having a lot of coincidences like what you're describing, it's because of karma?
Mhm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's their karma. Yeah. And I mean, we'll go into, next course, we're taking a summer break, and then we'll resume in the fall and we go into karma.
Okay.
And so now you'll get 3 months of a lot of karma. Everything everyone's ever been asking for will finally be answered. Probably not, because it'll be deeply hidden, but nonetheless, we'll do the best we possibly can. But yes, everyone's always like, karma, tell me. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so famous opening statement is, who has it?
I bow down to the person who has these 5 qualities: the protection, those gone to bliss, the teacher, those who wish to benefit sentient beings, and those who have turned into persons with valid perception.
Great. And it's the protector, right? You said protection, but you meant protector. Okay, just making sure. Great. So this was a statement that Master Dignaga had that he just talked about in terms of 5 qualities of who? Who was he talking about? The Buddha. So whenever we see the teacher as a capital T, that's referring to someone who has had the direct perception of emptiness. Okay. Number 6, give the definition of valid perception. We did talk about it, but we'll do it again.
That which is perceived by an unaffected mind.
Another way that we also talked about it was a fresh perception. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So another definition you can have is a fresh or unmistaken state of mind. Describe very generally the meaning of the term person of valid perception. Does anyone remember that?
Didn't we talk about that one already too? You're not under intoxicants or a mental affliction?
But if they're a person of
Valid perception.
that's the only type of perception they have.
Oh, then I would.
Say make K.
Yeah.
What?
Say make K.
That's right.
Okay.
Sandy, just like,
Roll it up into that.
seriously, God. Sandy just making us all look bad. We're like, what? That's right. Okay. Fancy pants. Here we go. Seimei Keibu, person of valid perception. Basically speaking to someone who only speaks valid perceptions. And really, ultimately, what this is talking about is the Buddha. Question 8, what are the 3 main methods for a normal person to determine that the Buddha is totally correct about the very deep teachings he gave? What is that? What are the 3 main methods for a normal person to determine that the Buddha is totally correct? So basically they're saying, there are 3 tests. Like anybody can be up here, including myself, right? That are just saying blah, 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 blah. Like, and now we're going to all draw blood. And now we're going to all, who knows? Like you can have people saying weird things all the time, especially you see it in spiritual practices. So how can you test to make sure that teachers, as well as even the Buddha, when you're looking at scripture, that it works for you. How do you know it's true? You just go on your gut? That's no good. Do not go on your gut.
It can't be disproved by a valid perception.
So there's one, right? The first one was can't be. Mm-hmm.
Your own value.
Exactly.
That you
So-
have or have had. Right?
Yeah, so it's basically saying the first one is saying it can't be disproved by something that you've experienced. If someone says to you, that's sitting up here and saying, this is not a pen, it's
Magic wand.
a magic wand that's going to change everything right now. You know, you have to look at it and be like, does that function for me? Does that work? Is that my valid perception? And if that's not true, then I'm just a crazy person, right? So the first test is always, what is, it cannot be disproved by your own personal valid perception. What's the second one?
So in that example, doesn't that mean that I would have to believe you because I haven't had a valid perception that disproves that says it is a magic wand? Like, because I haven't, I have to, I have to believe that there's a possibility that it could be a magic wand, right? Isn't that what that's saying?
No, it's saying that if you have a valid perception that specific, like completely goes against that idea, that's not true, then it would be, it's not that it could be. I mean, it always,
So I thought we were
the valid,
using it to do like with the case of past and future lives, and we say because I've never had an experience
Yeah.
of what could happen,
Yeah.
I can't disprove that there could be a future life.
yes, but in this particular, the three that we're talking about specifically has to do with like teachings. With the teacher in particular, it's like if a teacher says something, what are the three tests that you need to have in place? Yeah. I know there's a lot of different tests, but that's good that you're actually seeing how they can be connected and woven in. That's interesting. That's good. Yeah, because this is basically saying, you know, if you have teachers that are saying things that don't make sense to you, it's not for you to sit there and be like, okay, it could maybe be true that she's really being real and this is a magic wand and I just have to believe that this is a magic wand. But if your valid perceptions completely negate that, then that would negate even the teachings itself, right? So in particular, like with the Buddha, when he's talking about the Four Noble Truths and saying life is suffering, all of us will sit around and be like, well, is it suffering? Do we have valid perceptions that our life is suffering? Do you all think life is suffering? Because he does.
Yes.
I'm not saying it's crappy, but it's suffering. We have a suffering nature. There's nothing good that always stays. Really. Is there one thing that you can mention that's always been good and it stays good all the time? Happiness, like in a new relationship, amazing. At a new job, even better. Let's talk again in 9 months and see how you feel. You know, let's talk in 2 years and see how you feel, right? So many things that we've experienced in our own lives, when it's good, it's not to say there isn't good, but it doesn't stay all the time. It's part of our human suffering as being human.
Consistent in the absence of contrast.
Right.
Yeah, true.
Just
Yeah,
if
of course.
It was always good, then it would
Yes.
always be neutral.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And so when the Buddha is speaking about the Four Noble Truths or the Four Arya Truths and saying, for instance, suffering, this would be one of the things like you would look at and say, okay, well, is that something that I validly have perceived? Does that work for me? Have I experienced that? Right. The second one is
Jepa Kinupa.
Great. Jepa Kimi Nupa.
The statement can't be contradicted by correct, airtight reasoning.
Yeah. So basically here is there airtight reasoning to be able to Is there airtight reasoning? Right. So this is where the logic comes in. That works for everyone? Yeah. So if someone says, life is suffering, it's like, okay, well, have I had the valid perception that it is? Yeah. Is there airtight reasoning that it's not suffering? I don't have any. I don't have any, right? So then I'm like, okay, that works. Okay, now moving to the third one. What's the third one? Naching Mingel. It's before, yeah, exactly. There's no contradictions. There's no contradictions within the teachings itself. So these are 3 tests that I mean, we talked about in class, but very much keep it in your arsenal so that you're always utilizing it as you go through teachings. Okay, question 9. Name and describe briefly the 3 ground rules for interpreting the Buddha that is for deciding that something which Lord Buddha said was meant only figuratively and not literally. What are the 3?
The intent.
The first one was the intent. So what does that mean?
There's this hidden message in a way. Like, here's this a statement that you can take literally, but figuratively is the intention is to stir something up.
Yeah. So basically this was about when the Buddha speaks, how many times have we heard of contradictions in teachings? What are some that you've heard? Do you know? Can you recall? Killing your what? Killing your mother and your father, that the Buddha said. What's another one that you've heard of? Or that you know of?
If you meet the Buddha in the street, kill the Buddha.
Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard that.
I've never heard that either.
Really?
I've never heard that. Huh. Uh-huh. Yeah.
It's the same concept.
Yeah, same concept, for sure. So, so basically the idea is that when the Buddha speaks, that you will sometimes see or encounter contradictions. And so the question then here is, how do you know the Buddha is teaching figuratively or literally? How can you decipher that? So the first one is, it has to do with intent, right? What was the intent of the statement? What did the teacher have in mind and knowing the intent? Okay. The second one is,
Does it contradict obvious direct reality?
does it contradict obvious direct reality? Right? Kill your mother and father.
No.
Yeah.
Wait,
I mean, yes, it does contradict my reality. Yes.
Great.
But no, that what you're saying is no, I wouldn't do that.
No.
Yeah.
That's bad.
They're saying no, it doesn't.
Yeah.
No, I won't.
Right? Okay. And the third one is what?
Is there a reason to make such a compelling?
Is there a reason why there should be such a compelling statement, right? Is there a compelling need? I think one of the examples I had given was when a teacher had said to me, when I was trying to figure out what to do next with one of my retreats and my studies and deepening my practice. And when we went out for tea, and I was asking him for a lot of advice about what to do and having my notebooks out and very studious. He told me, he looked at me and he told me, he goes, I remember he was looking at my notes and pushed it away and put his hand on the table and he leaned forward and goes, this is what you need to do. And I'm like, okay, tell me, I'm ready. And I'm having my notebook up like this, literally, because I don't want to miss eye contact. So I'm writing my notes. I'm telling him what to do. And he goes, I want you to go home. and I want you to he goes, I want you to go home and roll yourself a really nice joint. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, then what? He goes, and then I want you to smoke it. And that was my advice from my teacher. I kid you not. And I'm like sitting there being like, is that literal or is that figurative? Like, what does that mean? What is each, like, what does that, you know?
Chill out.
Totally, right, totally, right? But it was like in that moment, it's like, what was the intent of my teacher to say that? You know? What, like, there were so many different, like, I remember just being like on the subway home, being like, okay, now I have to go find some pot. And like, who am I going to call? And like, this is, you know, like 10 years ago. And I'm like, now it's like you're just everywhere on the street. You know, I mean, it was really, and it happens all the time when you have teachers, when you take on a teacher, your teacher does stuff and will say stuff, and it's not uncommon to just walk out and be like, what? I'm so confused. Is that what I'm supposed to be doing? Like, or even contradiction of advice. Sometimes you'll get one advice and you have a Dharma brother or sister who gets a completely different advice, but it seems like the same problem. And so it makes no sense why this person gets that and you get something else. And it almost, and there are times where even the advice itself from the two other people are incredibly contradictory, you know? And so these three are actually rather important to be able to keep in mind, because there are times where you have to be able to understand that teachings are not literal all the time. And even when you are in a teaching, like a big group, you know, even big group teachings that we have, the teachings aren't always literal. And students take it so literally. They're like, oh, I noticed that the teacher always wears this color sock, so I should wear this color sock. I mean, really, you know, it's like, and they have this cushion, and so I'm going to get that cushion. And their altar looks this way, so my altar needs to look that way. I mean, it's insane what happens. And so just start to understand that there is something figurative. There's also hopefully something poetic. And also take a look and see what your teacher is really trying to teach you, you know, versus what you're trying to assume that is. Okay, question 10. What does a person have to know in order to be all-knowing? What is it that you really have to know if you're all, like, being all-knowing sounds amazing or not, I don't know, depends if I can turn it off, but what's the point of being all-knowing? To be omniscient?
No, what to take up and what to give up.
Yeah, right. So it's Longja or Dorja, is the Tibetan, right? The whole point of being omniscient isn't so that you can read everyone's mind. I think by the time you're at that level, that's probably not the biggest interest to you in that way. The whole point of being omniscient, or not the whole point, but one of the main points of being omniscient is to be able to know what to take up and what to give up, you know, which is actually really beautiful, right? Right? Having really a clear understanding of what you participate in and what that looks like versus letting things go, you know, that don't make sense, right? Sounds amazing. Question 11, what evidence do we have that the Buddha is unerring?
He had a valid perception and described so well the first truth.
Uh-huh.
Like the suffering.
Uh-huh. Great. So this was the summary that we had for that statement, the Goklam and Dukun. That was really a summary of the 4 Arya truths, the Noble Truths. Who wants to do the rundown of the 4 truths? Life is suffering. What's the second one?
There's a cause to suffering.
There's a cause to suffering. So life is suffering and there's a cause to suffering, which means?
There's a cause, there's an end.
Yes, what's before the end? There's a path,
Yeah.
right? Path, and then that there's an end.
Oh, that comes first.
Path comes first.
We have
No, end comes first, then path.
Just kidding. That there's an end to suffering. Thank you. And the last one is yes. Okay, great. That was my path. I was like, no, we're going to find the path first, and then we're going to go the end. So the first one is, yeah, no, I was stoned at the time. So, yeah. So the first one is life is suffering, right? Second one is that there's a cause, then there's an end, and that there's a path. Right? Those are the 4 Arya truths or noble truths. When do you experience the 4 noble truths or the Arya truths?
Yeah, direct perception.
When you have a direct perception of emptiness, you actually have that experience. There is actually a meditative state that you can be in, where you can actually have the direct perception of what emptiness means, the concept of what emptiness means. And there is, you'll sometimes, rarely, but sometimes you'll hear teachers talk about the experience of what that looks like, or in the scriptures it will speak about it. In particular, we've learned from the scriptures that when you have the direct perception of emptiness, you actually experience the 4 Arya truths. You actually experience what those 4 statements mean. Currently, your valid perception is with just the first one, but most of us don't really know what the cause of our suffering is. Most of us don't really believe in the moment that there's an end to our suffering. When we are in the moments of suffering, it feels like it's endless. And most of us don't even realize there's a path to get out of suffering. So those other 3 remaining you experience directly in your state of having the direct perception of emptiness. Okay. Question 12, the last of the 4 reasonings of the forward order involves great compassion. What is the difference between great, holy great, and just compassion? What's compassion?
It's like the wish for goodness for others. And then great compassion is the intent to achieve that or to help others. And holy great is like actually achieve.
Close. Where was it off? It was close.
Not really achieve it. The great compassion would be that you decide that you will take action to remove their suffering and you will take on that responsibility. And then I think that holy great compassion is when you actually have the capacity to help them.
Yeah.
It's like you make action that it might work out enough, and then
Yeah.
you're Buddha, you're left alone.
Yeah. Good. Nice. So there's 3 different kinds of compassion in the scriptures that they talk about. There's your everyday compassion, which is what most people actually do when they do it, where they're saying you wish others to be free of suffering. And that's it, pretty much. You wish for them, you have compassion, you wish that they were out of suffering. That's what compassion is in this definition. Great compassion is wishing for someone to be out of suffering, and also saying, like you had said, Sarah, where you're taking responsibility, like, I'm going to help you get out of suffering. It is my responsibility to do that for you, right? It's a different feeling. Yes?
I have a question about that.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I struggle with, as we talked about, you can never really know what's in someone else's mind.
Yes.
You can never really know what they're going through. So I understand the wish to want to say, like, I want to be the one that's going to do that for you. But don't you always come up against, like, not actually knowing how to do it until you're enlightened and have holy great compassion?
Totally. I think that sounds fair to me.
So it's the
That's
wish
why it's great
despite
compassion,
that
because so you can,
knowledge.
I'm sorry, what?
It's like the wish despite the knowledge that
Yeah. I mean,
you can't actually ever take away.
well, you can at some point, but you have to wish for it. You can't even, how are you going to get to great holy if you can't even get to great,
Yeah.
or holy great, holy great, right? I mean, it's also the karma, right? I mean, it's the intention. I mean, everything in Buddhist philosophy is always intention based. It's never the result that you're tied to. It's the intention, right? So if you have the intention, because you can't, and this is a karma conversation, right? How many times have you had an intention to be really nice to someone and they're just like a total prick to you, right? It makes no sense, like all the time. It happens with people we know. It happens with people we don't know. Like you go to a restaurant or a coffee shop and you're like, hi, good morning. And they're just totally rude and you have no idea what's going on, but you have you went in with an intention, right? And so even our intent, like you have intentions, which is what creates the karmic seed, right? The intention is what plants your karmic seed. And so the result of it is what? If the intention, if in the moment that I'm going to go say hi to you, my intention is to be polite and nice and friendly and warm and all this other good stuff, right? And I act on it, that's my intention that I'm planting into that seed. And then the way in which you behave is what?
An old karma, right?
It's a ripening of an old karmic seed that was already planted in the past. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So in fact, this correlation of me acting to you and you responding, even though it looks like it's reactive, responsive situation, it actually really isn't. Because the way in which you would act and behave is like if I behave poorly to someone in the past, that seed that I planted of wanting to treat someone poorly in the past, that seed is ripening in this moment. And so that explains why I can be nice to the same person every day, and every day the response is different. Because in fact, if my nice gesture always warranted a nice response, then it would always be that exchange, right? Every time I call my mom and being happy, she would always be happy back instead of like harping on me about something that I didn't do or whatever, right? And so that's how that works. So in this situation too, it's like, yes, you're right. Like when you're in great compassion, it's the wish for it until you actually hit that. And then you can move into it. But you can't get into even having the karma for holy great compassion if you haven't cultivated it. Does that make sense?
And then one more question, is great compassion bodhicitta?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's what it is. Yeah, great compassion is bodhicitta. And what's bodhicitta?
Be enlightened for the sake of all sentient beings.
Yeah, for you and all sentient beings. Yeah. That's what bodhicitta is. So bodhicitta is what does bodhicitta do for you in a practice? Like how does it, where does it come into play? Why would you want that?
It's the path to reach Buddhahood versus nirvana.
Yeah, exactly. So if you have a wish to be yourself versus you and others is the difference between nirvana and enlightenment. Full enlightenment means you and everyone, and nirvana is just you. Okay? All right, next.
It's like the difference between an Arya and an Arhat.
Yeah.
So Arya is great compassion. Arhat. Oh no, Arya is just. Well, would you even use it?
I don't know.
Yeah. Never mind.
Arya
doesn't have a direct perception of that.
They do.
Oh, they do.
But it doesn't necessarily include the compassion component.
That's true.
You can become an Arya.
Yeah. Yes.
But without the compassion,
Yeah.
you can't become a Buddha.
No.
Or
Without the compassion, you can't. Without the holy, without having bodhicitta in your heart, yeah, you can't become a Buddha. Okay. Why can't this cause the outside physical matter? Can I just skip one?
Yeah.
Name 3 reasons why the Sharvakas believe that the mind died and the body died. So we started talking about mind and where the mind comes from.
right? So we're building this whole case right now. We're going through all these things about valid perception. We're sprinkling a little bit of emptiness in the way, and some karma. We're talking about compassion, and now we're moving into mind. And again, this is a build to talk about future lives. So we started talking about the Sharpakas, which is a different school that was having a debate, and they believed that the mind died when the body died. And what were the three arguments?
The mind is a quality of the mind is a quality of the body. The second is the mind is by nature dependent on the body. And the third is the mind is a result of the body.
Great, perfect. So the first one is mind is a quality of the body. Second one is mind is dependent on the body. And the third one is mind is a result of the body.
That is so weird to me because they contradict even in themselves. Like, why are you telling me that it's dependent on the body, but now it's a result of the body? Like, if it was dependent on the body, then how can it also be the result of the body? They just don't.
Well, no, because the difference is that if it's dependent, so the example that they give, dependent on the body, right, is if something was hanging on a wall. Right, like something's dependent on something. When something is a result of something, the example they give is like a light in the lamp. A light is a result of the lamp being turned on. So,
But they're claiming it's all three of these things.
but they're claiming that these are three reasons as to why the mind dies when the body dies.
But I feel like I'm still gonna cook that because there's something real weird about it being dependent and the result. I mean, it's good because I feel like this is what modern science thinks.
Yeah, it is what modern science is.
Yeah.
Modern science does believe, for the most part, believes that when the body dies, the mind dies.
But I would say mostly because of the third one.
Yeah. 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 And so we move into the next question, which is explain the meaning of material cause. What's a material cause?
It's the cause for a result when something is flopped into something, and it always has to relate, has to have the same characteristics.
Right. So we talk about, so we have these reasonings of Sharkas that are saying the mind dies and the body dies. And then we go into Mirlan Giyu, which we talked quite a bit about, right, of material cause. And so we're starting to base this as another part of another argument that we're going to go into, right, where it wasn't Master Dignaga, it was Dharmakirti. Dharmakirti was talking about here about material causes, saying that all material causes has to have kind of a light, so it produces light, right? So for instance, the acorn is a material cause for the oak tree. The sun, the light, the soil, what would those be considered? Secondary causes. But the primary material cause would be the acorn that created the oak tree. So it starts here, and we go to, why can't the cause of your mind at birth be living physical matter?
It can't be all, and it can't be just one. So like if physical matter is made up of your sense powers, which is sight, touch, hearing, taste, smelling. If you don't have all of them, if you don't have all of them in the mind, how am I going to say this? It doesn't mean that your mind isn't dependent on all of them at the same time, and your mind isn't just dependent on one.
Right. It can't be.
Right. And then, because there are people who don't have one of the sense powers, like they're blind or they're deaf, but they still have a mind. And then if physical matter is also defined as fire, earth, wind, or water, again, not all, or just one. So like people who live in an arid desert where there's not a lot of like water, they still have the mind.
So this is the logic that we, remember this chart?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's my favorite chart. So this is the chart that we were looking at, that Kendra J brought up actually, for this one. And so what he's saying basically is all things are Shija, which is all knowing things. All things that you know are on the very top. And he basically said everything is divided, according to him, to two separate, or I should say even him, according to the Galupa school, they're saying all things are divided into these two categories. Takpa and mitakpa, which is unchanging or changing. All things that are knowing are either a changing thing or they're an unchanging thing. Okay? They're either going to change or they're not going to change. And so the question was, can the mind, from here it was, okay, well, where does the mind come from? Can the mind come from an unchanging thing? Why not? Because what changes? The mind changes. So the question is, can the material cause, right? Is it something unchanging? And you're saying no, because the mind changes. So how can something that is unchanging produce something that is changing? That doesn't make sense.
Right.
And so then he moves on and says, okay, so let's say it's changing. Under changing, there are two categories. There's physical matter, is what he's putting it as, and the mind. And under physical matter, he's saying all physical matter are either two things, or a combination of two things, but they're two things. It's either sense powers, or it's outside matter. And sense powers are all of your five senses that you have. So either things are like, all physical things out there are either physical matter that you feel and touch and see, right? Or it's going to be physical matter in terms of talking about it, in terms of your sense powers. Does that make sense? Okay. So then he's saying here, well then, let's say, does the mind come from your senses? Does the mind come from your five senses that you have? And so he said, let's take a look at that. Is it all five of them? And what Sanji's saying is, it can't be all five of them. Because if one were gone, then your mind would be gone by a quarter, right? If you were blind and deaf, then you would be 2/3, like your mind would be gone by, right?
2/5.
Is that 2/5? Just kidding, 2/5. I'm sorry. Right? And that doesn't make sense. And so he says, well, it can't be all five. So is it maybe just one of them? Maybe it's just one, maybe it's not all five. And so the problem with that, according to what Santi was saying, was it can't just be the one, because if it were just the one, whenever that sense would go away, then your mind would then go away, right? So then he goes, okay, well then let's move, so it's not, your sense powers is not what creates your mind. So maybe it's all the elements. And so in Tibetan Buddhism, they have 4 elements. I know in Chinese medicine there's 5 because they have wood, but in Tibetan Buddhism there's 4. And what they're saying in 4 elements, like earth, wind, water, and fire, they're saying all elements, everything that you see in Tibetan Buddhism is that has a quality of all 4 of them, okay? Like everything has a quality of all 4 elements, it's just different proportions that you're experiencing. So he's basically saying, is it kind of the outside, or is it the molecules, right? Is it your organs? Like, is it actual physical matter that is what your mind is, right? And he's using the 4 elements, because that's what they used. And so that create your mind? And the answer is no, because if one of the elements were gone, then your mind would also be lessened, and that's not true, right? And could it be just one of the elements? And that doesn't hold either, just like it did with the sense powers, because if one of those were gone, then no mind would be there. And in fact, you could also say that if that element continued to reproduce, you would have more minds pop up, right, in a lab. And so he's saying, well then the mind can't come from physical matter. So then where else can it go? So it moves over to Rigpa, and it says, can the mind be from someone else's mind? You know, we think that like our mind comes from our parents sometimes, right? Is it possible that your mind can be from someone else's mind? No, why not?
So it'd be exactly the same.
It would be same. It would be the same as your parents, right? And how many times have we seen kids that don't seem to resemble their parents at all intellectually, right? Or in the space of their mind, I should just say. Yeah? Okay. So he's saying it's not that, so then it leaves us with saying that therefore the mind comes from where?
Previous one.
Your previous mind. Your mind produces mind. And so if mind produces mind, it means that your mind therefore never ends and therefore never began, that it is continuous. And it also speaks to them about future lives. Yeah? Okay. We're gonna stop here for tonight and we'll resume the rest of it next week. Make sure your names are on the quizzes.
I read an interesting article about they did a test between training snails by
Training snails?
there's like this UCLA research team, they trained some snails by giving them electrical shocks so that they would be sensitive in their reaction. They took the neurons, like the RNA of the neurons from these trained snails, and they put it into untrained snails who were not conditioned to react, and they reacted. So I don't know, it was an interesting article, like that made me think. I mean, it may not be that they're actually transferring mind from a trained snail to an untrained snail.
Yeah.
They're transferring some sort of neurological reaction, which was really interesting.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah, it's physical matter.
It is physical.
Translating physical matter.
Okay. But for a second, it's good that you're looking at that, being like, what is this, like, is that what we're talking about, you know?
Yeah.
Because that's how it starts. I mean, that's what you should be doing.
Because I still struggle with the mind. Like, it's easy to go from changing physical matter and mind and be like, well, but wait a minute, why are you saying mind is not physical matter? I'm really hung up on that because.
Why is it not physical matter?
What if
Because mind doesn't have the same qualities of physical matter. Physical matter, mind's quality is, it's clear and it's translucent. It's clear. There's a clarity, and physical matter can be weighed, it can be determined, there's boundaries in physical matter. Your mind doesn't have boundaries. It doesn't have the same characteristics. The characteristics are completely different. We can't measure or weigh a mind. It's boundless, it's clear, it's bright. There's a whole qualification of that what mind is. That's not the same as physical matter, technically. But that would be, I mean, but for me, the thing about like clear and white, I'm like, kind of, that's a little harder for me because of how we project things. But when they do talk about like weighing, being able to weigh it, I mean that, or the balance, like physical matter has boundaries. And the fact that the mind doesn't, like that usually helps you resolve. But the mind's not physical matter.
I checked out on the thing, it said that was hard to understand.
The physical, like, we were just talking about whether, like, why isn't the mind physical matter?
I just agree that balancing helps me, that like
Yeah.
I can go think about my fridge and suddenly my brain is in my fridge.
Right.
And then I can think about, if I like quantify all the people I love, how can I ever even begin to measure the love? Like it's not measurable.
Yeah.
That's what
If you can find a way to measure that, that would be awesome.
It's the physical matter that's doing the measuring. How is that prove that the mind is
That's true.
something
I just have-
separate from the physical matter that's doing the measuring?
I mean, I just had this really long conversation and ongoing about like, how do you measure love, you know, and how do you measure empathy, and how do you measure, you know, inspiration? Like, there are we have so many metrics that we've created in the physical matter realm, and yet there are all these other metrics that are measurable, you know, from a certain, like, we just haven't yet evolved into having a metric system that can do that.
I thought they were called before immeasurable.
Sorry. There we go.
Sashi Kuki Jimshin Meto Cham Riba Shin De Impadi Sange Shindu Mikte Uhargi Jokun Nanda Shimba Shukarsho Gewati Kyoku Sunam Yeshe Sokso Shin Sunam Yeshe Jungwe Dampa Kuni Toparsho.
Just get comfortable in a meditative position. And we're just going to close with a deep inhale and exhale through your nose. Recall what brought you to class tonight. Why did you come? What were you looking to find? Really crystallize that intention that you had. And then find a way to expand it. And think about someone who you know, who is suffering. Bring them in front of your mind's eye. And send that person all the love, the great compassion, and your intention that you brought to class. Dedicate it to them. Offer it to them. Wishing for them to be free of suffering. Commend yourself for coming to class this evening. Acknowledge the effort you've made. And get home safely. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.